right, beautiful. So just our usual reminder that closed captions are available in Zoom. If you need any help, we have Cora and Ellie standing by in the chat, so you can just put something in and they can help you out as well. Go to the next slide, kindly. All right, so a quick heads up for a polling question we will include in a little while. But as you know, we have a meeting after the meeting. And historically, we have not been recording it because we want to just free flow discuss. At the same time, there's so much so many great information that comes out of those meetings that we were wondering if we could record it, and we can either include it with a public video recording that would be on our website like always, or we can include it in the recording, but not make the recording of a meeting after the meeting public, but we would then be able to have a copy of a chat, which has links that people sometimes share or comments they put in there, and then we would share links and notes anonymized that we could then also put on the website. So it would be the meeting after meeting would be recorded, but not shared publicly, that part, but information from it could be shared. So what we're going to be doing later on is we're going to include this question, our polling questions for you all to choose either don't record it at all the way we're currently doing it, or yep, go ahead, record it and make it public. That's totally fine. Or B, record it but don't share it. So think about it. If more than 20% of you all say, please don't record it, we won't be recording it. If less than 20% say that, then we will go ahead and either choose option A and B depending on what people are saying to that one. So keep that thought in mind. We'll get to that question in a little while. All right, next slide. Just a reminder for the great folks who are behind our series. So the goal of our seminar series is to advance the science on recovery community centers. And the best way to do that is to bring together different people from different perspectives. So instead of living in our silos, we can all talk together and advance important issues in the science. And these are the great people that design it and think through it and put this all together. Next slide, please. We do have a couple of shout outs. We just wanted to do a shout out for We Do Recovery Community Center, who has a Frozen in Hope event tomorrow that they wanted folks to know about if they wanted to join. And then on the next slide, we have another event happening tomorrow, and this is the 20th anniversary of the Northern Ohio Recovery Association, who's doing a huge gala event, and it's very exciting. So if any of you are in the area or want to go there, please join. It's going to be a great celebration. 20 years, long time. Next slide. Here's our microfiche, a reminder that there is a consortium on addiction recovery science that we are part of, and it also addresses other pieces of peer recovery support services. This will be in your email or on the website starting Tuesday, so you'll be able to read all this microfiche here for opportunities for being part of a community board, for submitting papers, for a variety of other things. So watch out for that in your email to read on Tuesday. On the next slide, we have one timely announcement regarding course, and this is the National Conference on Addiction Recovery Science that the consortium puts together. The deadline was recently extended to January 6th. So if you wanted to submit something but didn't quite get to it, you still have now another month to do it. It is an online conference. It's all about recovery science and particular peer recovery support services science, very accessible. So I'm hoping you guys will come to it and that you will submit things that you want to present at that conference. Next slide. All right, then also our shout out for our list of RCCs. We have a link here that Ellie just threw into the chat for us. If your RCC isn't on here or an RCC isn't on here that you happen to know about, by all means, please do send us a note and let us know. Also, if you just drop it into the chat here, we do go for the chat and then we will update our list. The reason we have a list of RCCs is that people ask us, do I have an RCC near me? And then we can say, well, yes, you do. And we hand over the list. It's also a list that's publicly available on the website. So if you all want to ever look it up, you can go to the website and see who we know about. All right, next slide. Perfect. I think I did reasonably well in speeding. I'm going to turn it over to Lana, who is here with us from Recover Wyoming, and she is going to tell us what it feels like and what it is like to walk through the doors of her RCC. Lana, over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for including me in the discussion today. My name is Lana Mahoney. I'm a woman in long-term recovery from stimulant use disorder, which means that I ended my chaotic relationship with substances on October 22nd, 2011. I am a certified peer specialist, and I'm currently the executive director of Recover Wyoming. Next slide, please. So, Recover Wyoming is a nonprofit and RCO, or Recovery Community Organization. We were founded in 2010 by Laura Griffith. We are a charter member of ARCO. We're currently the only RCO in the state of Wyoming. There has been some efforts to start up RCOs in other areas, but we unfortunately haven't found folks to kind of spearhead that. So hopefully we'll get some more in Wyoming. We are a peer-run organization, meaning that all of our staff and the majority of our board are in long-term recovery from substance use disorder and/or mental health challenges. Our entire staff are certified peer specialists through the ICNRC, which I'll touch on here in a moment. Our core services are that we provide peer-based recovery support services. Obviously, we honor multiple pathways to recovery. With everything going on with opioids and fentanyl, we've really tried to support harm reduction strategies, which has been different in Wyoming. We're a little slow on the curve and learning that saves lives. And so we've really been advocating for that by providing harm reduction supplies at our center. Next slide, please. So I just wanted you to get just a little visualization of what the center looks like. The top right slide is just a picture of our entryway. It has SAMHSA's Recovery Bill of Rights. I think we really try to illustrate to people that our center is warm and welcoming, and that they have the individuals that come in, we treat them with high regard. We want them to know that, there's many rights that they have as individuals. Usually people come in to get information and resources, receive recovery support, but we also have people that come in to attend meetings. We have laptop computers. We know that, recovery is not just about use, but all elements of life and wellness. So we have people that do job searching, housing searches, just chat, have a cup of coffee. We do have gaming tables, things like that. We also hold recovery friendly events. So this month we'll be doing a chili, pajama, and game night. And so we just try to provide opportunities for people to network and find other people with similar focuses. Next slide. So I mentioned the core of what we do is peer-based recovery support. So we have our recovery coach and telephone recovery support programs. Our recovery coach program is usually done in person in Laramie County. However, our telephone recovery support program, we're able to implement statewide. That's really great for rural areas in Wyoming where there aren't a lot of recovery resources. So we do have that opportunity. We provide all recovery meetings at the recovery center. Aside what we do, our core is really the peer-based recovery support, supporting people on their journeys to wellness. But we also provide all the training for peer specialists for the state of Wyoming. So some of what we do is like our new peer specialist training, peer support within the criminal justice system. We're doing a harm reduction and supervisor training. And then we always hold our annual conference. So, what we've seen in Wyoming is an increase in the number of individuals being trained and also the number of folks being certified, which has really increased capacity for agencies across the state to continue to provide those peer-based recovery support programming and resources. Next slide, please. So finally, we also provide the certification for peer specialists in the state. Recover Wyoming as an entity applied and was approved to be the member board for the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium. For Wyoming, that really elevated the professionalism of the peer workforce in our state. It provided formal ethical guidelines and process for violations of ethics. And it just really helped us to enhance what we do and provide that quality support. It's not a ton compared to other states, but currently we have about 175 peers actively certified through the ICNRC through our state. So basically, people come to Recover Wyoming. We support them in the ways that we can. We've tried to support people statewide as best we are able through telephone recovery support, but we're continuing to make connections with other agencies throughout the state to help support those efforts statewide. And I think that's it. Is that my last slide? Yes.
Looks like it. Perfect. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lana. So
Thank you.
I'm very excited to hear how you're gonna what you think about the Massachusetts RCC. So we kind of get to hear the continuum, the starting story where you are at, and then how it grows later. Wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you.
So for our polling questions, we'll start them now. You all know them. So we will have the usual demographic kind of questions. Then we'll have some teaser questions about the content to come. And then, of course, we also have a question that I mentioned about whether or not we should be recording the meeting after the meeting. As you're going through it, you have a gray bar on the right to get you from question to question. And once you're done, the submit button on the bottom right should turn blue. So I'll give you all a few minutes to work through that. We will move on when about 80% of us have completed it. And then we will share the results.
Look at this, man. This is incredible.
And do the last two. Bettina,
Mm-hmm.
Julia, the last two are, we have to wait until the presentation to fill them out.
It's your guess. It's what you
Yeah.
think will be found. So we can see how that matches up to what was actually found. How are we doing with completions?
We just hit 60%.
All right.
Okay, we just hit 80 exactly.
All right, beautiful. So let's close the poll unless anybody wants us to wait another second.
Nope,
Looking good.
I already did.
Go for it. All right, so here we have it. So you guys have it on your screen too, and you can just use the gray button on the right to scroll through. But to answer the questions that we had, so in terms of recording, we have 18% who would prefer that we don't record, so that is below our cutoff. So we will then record it, but not include the recording in the public segment. So the video recording we'll publish within the next couple of days will only be the usual hour. And then for the other part, the meeting after meeting, which we are recording, that won't be put online. But what we will do is we will take notes from it, and they will anonymize the notes. Any links you put in there, resources, we'll include in that write-up, and any other write-up will summarize thoughts, but we won't attribute it to anybody. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to keep recording, but we will let you know at what point we reach the hour. Great. And then what do you think was the most mentioned challenge faced by RCCs? And the top runner here, it seems to be limited funding, 36%, followed by limited community awareness and increasing number of people presenting with mental health challenges. So let's see how that bears out when we see a presentation. And what do you think were the strengths of the RCCs in Massachusetts? And there's a lot of people voting here for a strong peer participatory process. So let's see if we were right with our intuition there. If you can move us to the next slide, Liv. So what we have today is we are going to have two presenters and one discussant. So Danielle O'Brien and Ijeoma Achara are going to be presenting in tandem. They're going to be passing back and forth about the great, amazing project that they did to get feedback from 26 RCCs in Massachusetts. Once they are done, Sharon is going to be sharing some perspectives and thoughts from having done research in this space before, just kind of like put them within the context of what she has seen. And hopefully throughout all of it, and at that point or earlier, all of you are going to chime in with questions, comments, thoughts. I can promise you it's very rich in food for thought, and we are excited to discuss with you all. So Ijeoma, Danielle, who am I passing it to? I think Danielle, right?
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle O'Brien. I'm the Director of Recovery Services at the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. It's great to be here today with all of you to share about this important project. I am a person in long-term recovery, and so this work is very important to me. Before I get started, I do want to recognize Dr. Bettina Hopner for all the work that she has done and committed to really studying the RCCs throughout the country, as well as MGH, Recovery Research Institute as a whole, Dr. Kelly, the team of people over there, everyone involved who has really dedicated so much research to the recovery science, and the data and findings of this emerging research about what people really need to build and sustain recovery has directly shaped what we are doing today at the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. The PRSC assessment conducted by Dr. Achara with myself and the Achara team in 2022. At the time, there was 26 centers involved. It was really important to me because this was a mechanism to ensure that the voice of lived experience was combined with the emerging science and the amazing model that we knew we already had at hand to shape the last round of funding, which now brings us to 39 peer recovery support centers throughout the state of Massachusetts, which I'm very proud to support. I thought it might be important to give a little bit of my journey into this because it all does really intertwine, and then turn it over to Dr. Achara, who will really give the full scope of what the assessment looked like. But how I came into this and what prompted the assessment in a nutshell, as someone who I grew up in South Boston, which is a location where we have one of the original 10 centers. And I struggled with alcohol use disorder, very young, undiagnosed, untreated. And I went to high school in Milton and excelled, worked after school, got into college at Suffolk University, excelled, stayed on honors the whole time, had a full-time job, was excelling at life, but all simultaneously was also a full-time alcohol consumer. And it was really destroying me, even if the outside did not seem that I had been, was being impacted because of successes. The truth was that I was progressing without it being addressed at all. And I was introduced to OxyContin in about 2003 after graduating from school. And it really led to a progressive struggle with opioid use disorder. After many years of struggling and progressing, in 2011, I found long-term treatment and recovery. So it's not that long of a window that I struggled with opioid use disorder, but I can tell you that during that 6-7 year period of progression through, really, I am lucky to be here to be presenting to you today. And one of the reasons I feel that I am here to present to you today is because with 13 years in recovery, I returned to my community after a long treatment and kind of corralled environment episode throughout the state. And I thought I was quite strong. And when I got back there, what I found was that I was not as strong as I thought with 13 months in sustained recovery. I was around people that were using substances, including the person I was in a relationship with. I had no friends or real connections in that area because I had been in other places. And although I was working full time and life seemed really good on the outside, post-acute withdrawal symptoms gone, I'm thriving in recovery, so it seems. I was starting to be really challenged and feeling a little unsteady. And fortunately for me, a peer recovery support center had opened up down the street from my house. I popped in there one day to see what this was all about. It was brand new. The people working there were very honest to say that we don't know what we're doing. What do you think we should do? And that was a very strange experience for me to be asked what I thought we should do and be incorporated into starting making decisions around the space, ultimately leaving the job that I was in, which wasn't my passion anyway, although it was good money at the time. I was willing to kind of step down to actually commit to being involved in this work, which I was seeing was having a direct impact on my own personal recovery, but also many people in my community. And you have to remember, this is on the backdrop of losing a lot of lives in our community. So we're watching people succumb to this disease. And suddenly this space where we're seeing over the years hundreds, and then thousands, and then more people come cycling through the space and building and sustaining long-term recovery over the years. And through that experience, I moved into supervisory and different roles throughout that organization, overseeing other ancillary recovery supports and services and recovery coaching programs and supporting the new directors at that center. And then coming over to BSAS to support the peer recovery support centers. And that was in 2019. It was the very end of 2019 when I started. And my charge at that time was they had expanded from the original 10 to 26 peer recovery support centers around the state. They had just funded the new 16, and I was brought in to do that. And 5 months later, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it had a huge impact on the recovery community and the ability for these centers to really get their bearings and launch. So what happened was I started meeting with them online, and we started to form this really great statewide network, which was like the silver lining of this thing. And I started conducting like survey monkeys with them to try to get feedback about what they were facing. And I was hearing them and I was seeing what they were saying. I was hearing what they were saying, but a new round of funding was coming. And I was so fortunate that at the time, Julio Hayda, who was on here today, who was the RSS leader for 10 years at the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services, had overseen those original 10 and grew out the model, had brought in Dr. Ijeoma Achara to work with her on larger system work, recovery-oriented system care work to try to shift the Bureau and the system to become more recovery-oriented. So they were doing that work. And then I was introduced to Ijeoma to do some work around the centers. And very shortly after that introduction was made, it became clear that it would be a good idea to just do this large-scale assessment and really looking for two things before we designed the last round of funding. One, what is the impact and fallout right now from COVID as they're trying to rebuild? And two, what is the evolution of these centers, right? So from the model from way back in the 2005, 2008, when these first rounds of funding, to now, what has shifted and changed? What are the needs? What does it look like? And try to sort out the two and see what we can do to be responsive in a quick way before this new round of funding goes out and no changes happen. So this was a way to do it very quickly. It was a wonderful process. I think everyone on here is familiar with what the centers do, so I'm not even going to get into the slides because I feel like you'll really hear it from Dr. Achara if she shares and speaks to that experience. It was such a powerful experience that even when she redoes it today, I'm going to try not to cry at some parts, because when people share what these spaces do for them, it is so authentic and sincere. And I was just honored to be part of the assessment and that the people entrusted to share from their heart with me and with Dr. Achara and the team so that we could take these findings and really make significant changes within the system to how we support people in recovery. So with that, I will turn it over to Ijeoma.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I appreciate that. I'm just going to share my slides here. Get this on. Thank you, everyone. It is amazing to be with you, and it was an honor to be brought in by Danielle and Julia to get to know the people in these centers and hear their perspectives. Sometimes when you're doing focus groups, you're kind of trying to beat the bushes for people to show up, and that was not the case here. People wanted their perspectives heard. They wanted their voices heard. People showed up for every single focus group that we did. So this work was done back in 2022. We met at the time with all of the centers, and we segmented the focus groups. So we met with the directors alone. We met with the staff and volunteers together, and then we met with the members, tried to meet with the members alone so that people would feel comfortable in their spaces, kind of sharing whatever their experience was without feeling like they had to kind of modify that or not be as candid as they wanted to. What I'm going to share on today really are what some of the strengths and challenges are that we heard when we were doing that work, what we saw as opportunities in response to Danielle's kind of questions about, okay, before we expand funding, what should we know? How should we be directing these resources? And then what was BSAS's response to the findings? So one of the poll questions, you guys hit it right on the head. One of the poll questions was really about what was the biggest strength that we saw. And I think the overwhelmingly from all perspectives, including ours, the biggest strength that we saw was these centers are grounded in a strong peer participatory process. And we hear peer-driven approaches. We hear, this language all around the country about things needed to be peer-led, peer-driven. My team and I have worked in many, many places around the country, and I think we can honestly say that we have never experienced a strong participatory process to the extent to which we saw this in Massachusetts in these centers. Sometimes when we go to places, people are cautious and are more in a caretaking mode. They don't want to stress people. They're concerned about putting too many demands on people. And so sometimes they have kind of an incremental process of getting people involved. What I loved about what we experienced in these centers, what people told us in these focus groups, one individual said, which really captures it, I've been coming for 3 or 4 months. I'm on the advisory board and I'm running groups. This was a new way. People experienced that the moment they walked in, just as Danielle said, she walked in looking for help, and they said, hey, what do you think? That was definitely the experience of so many. Somebody at No One Walks Alone shared, being needed saved me so many times from going out and relapsing, and I put those days and weeks and months together. We heard from so many that when they walked into the centers, they were immediately engaged and given a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning that lifted them beyond their substance use. This young woman at Alyssa's house nearly made me cry when she shared this. I still remember this focus group she shared. I just got out of prison. When I got out, I had no one. I felt like I had been locked up for a long time. I felt homeless. They introduced themselves to me as if they had known me forever. I always beat up on myself. Sorry. I always beat up on myself in prison. They take that little girl or little boy who is beaten down on the inside of you and make you stand up. And she just talked about the extent to which the centers empowered her, gave her a voice, gave her a sense of possibility for her life more than she thought possible before. And this individual from Stairway to Heaven said, Stairway saved my life from deep depression that I was in and the relapse. Coming here, I felt wanted, loved, and actually appreciated, which is special because we don't always feel appreciated much. Again, somebody from Bridge Recovery said, gave me a sense of purpose and belonging. We isolate ourselves. This is the beginning of being alive again. And so that peer participatory process over and over again, I cannot tell you how many times people said that being engaged, feeling a sense of value, worth, purpose, meaning, having opportunities to shape the center, not just receive from the center, but give back to the center was truly meaningful for them. We also heard that what was particularly important for people coming into the centers, the members, was this kind of low barrier engagement, center staff and volunteers meeting them exactly where they were. So one person from Recovery on the Harbor said, "You come here to get your life restarted. This place has been awesome. They helped me make a resume. You ask them for anything and they're helpful. I was hungry and he went into his own bag and gave me his sandwich." There was this sense that whatever people needed, they could find at the center, or the center was going to help connect them to that. At Plymouth Recovery Center, someone shared, "Everybody grabbed me in a different way and stole my heart. I never left by choice. They paid attention to what I needed and helped me to be successful that first day. That is why I came back. I had goals that I didn't even know that I had. Bobby hooked me up with grants to pay for housing, computer skills and technology training, education, food stamps, mass health, etc. They helped me uncover my goals." And I remember this individual when we were doing the focus groups. He was now on staff at the center. And he was reflecting back to the first day that he came in and just kind of checking this place out like Danielle was. What's this all about? And he said that first day he started to identify goals for his life based just on the interactions that he had with center staff, things that he didn't even know were important to him at the time. One of the things that was interesting when we thought about low barrier engagement is, and we see this around the country, there are some places that are focused on promoting engagement via rules. And some of the centers took this stance. They said that for people to come in, we don't want them just coming in, sitting around. We want them engaged. And so some of a small cohort of the centers had rules around, if you're going to be in the center space, you have to participate in group, you have to talk, you have to be an active member of the community. More of the centers, however, did not take that stance and said that engagement is a result of the relationship. It's not a requirement, but it comes out of the relationship. And these two quotes from these individuals, I think, just showed when we take that approach, what the outcome is. So at Everyday Miracles, one individual said, "When I first got out of prison, this was my second home. I came here from a halfway house. When I first started coming, I had my headphones on. It took about 2 or 3 months. Then I finally took my headphones off." And this other individual had a different perspective, completely, or similar perspective, completely different recovery center. But he said, "I had my headphones on for about 4 months. One of the staff members said to me, 'Don't worry about it. Take your time. Every other person here is on their phone.' Slowly, over 2 to 3 months, I put them down, and now I'm leading." And we heard that so often, that the centers created a space where people could come in as they were, not have demands on them, and the engagement came through the relationship. One of the things that blew us away about the centers were the strong partnerships that they forged with other community organizations, other entities, other systems. My favorite of all time example, and there's so many examples, but one of my favorite examples is Divine. They had an initiative that they called My Second Chance Cars. And it was a partnership between the City of Boston Credit Union that was promoting financial literacy. It was also a partnership with a VOTEC school, and the credit union would give people $2,000 loans to get a car. They had a partnership with a used car place that they would purchase the cars from, and then the students would work on the cars as a part of their training and get the cars ready for inspection. And in this process, the credit union would then also support the members in learning about, credit, how to manage your credit and build credit. And it was just a beautiful partnership. We saw those kinds of partnerships throughout these centers. Plymouth had anybody that they came in looking for a job, they were able to get people a job within a few days because of a strong relationship that they've built with a staffing company. We had another center where they had partnered with the child welfare system so that a mother who was a member at the center said, is it possible that instead of doing my visits with my daughter out in the community, in the park, in the library, it's so embarrassing. This feels like my second home. Would it be possible for me to use this place for my visitations? And the center became not only that member's second home, but also her daughter's second home, and the place where they could safely rebuild their relationship. There are just so many examples of how these partnerships were forged that really developed the whole person. Looking at the time, we also heard from many people that one of the things that pulled them in these centers, that it wasn't just about resource coordination, it wasn't about system navigation, it was more than transactional support. It was more than the material things that they got from the centers. We heard over and over again that these centers are our family, sometimes our first family, that they experience love, support, warmth, belonging, and that is what pulled them into the centers. So some of the challenges that we heard from center staff, the biggest challenge that we heard, and this was in the poll also, it wasn't about funding actually. The biggest challenge that we heard over and over again, and remember, this is coming out of COVID, just coming out of COVID, was the overwhelming, I think, need. The many people who were coming into the centers who also had mental health challenges, and the staff and the volunteers did not feel equipped to address the mental health needs that they were experiencing, or people were experiencing as they came into the centers. We also heard from the directors that they felt they needed support with training the staff and the volunteers. That even though people went through many times through support, the training that exists for peer staff in the state, that this is a unique environment, and the training that they got as recovery coaches didn't equip them fully to function in this unique environment, nor did it help the volunteers. And so the directors were feeling like this burden for training was on them, and they're trying to run the center, be a part of the center, lead everything and do this training. It was a lot. People were presenting, as you can imagine, post-COVID with significant material needs. And we were not surprised to hear that there was a high level of staff turnover. There were concerns about insufficient staffing. Some of the centers were able to do extended hours into the evenings on weekends, but many of them were not because they didn't have sufficient staffing, and as we often hear, concerns about low pay. The members were requesting more access to staff, members were raising that they wanted to see more staff because these members were coming in with complex challenges, complex life challenges. They were coming in with trauma, even in the focus groups, just expressing concern and regard for people. Many people broke into tears, talked about it, shared trauma with us that they had experienced or were experiencing. Some people hadn't spoken about those traumas before. And so this workforce of center staff and volunteers were often the first ones hearing this in many cases and not feeling equipped with how to address it, or again, in running the center, that they did not have the time to give people one-on-one support that they needed. There were challenges with community partners. So in many instances, centers had partnerships with local shelters where people who were unhoused had to leave the shelter at about 9 in the morning. Many of them would come to the center, and so became a part of the fabric of the center, were engaged there. but we remember focus groups where people were started telling us that when they were in these shelter spaces that they had to get a job at a certain period of time in their residency at the center, at the shelter. And they were sharing with us in focus groups that they were feeling urgency, feeling stress because they were having difficulty or did not feel ready in terms of their mental health challenges with finding a job. And so all of this stress was then brought into the center environment around how can you help me with this? And centers were trying to navigate, hey, shelters, can we create a different arrangement for these folks? So there were system navigation challenges that the center staff were working on. And many people shared that while they appreciated the centers helping them sustain their recovery, more and more of them were saying that our lives are more than our recovery status, more than whether we are using, not using, drinking, not drinking. We want a full life in the context of our community, and we want our centers to help us with that. One person said, instead of paying for treatment 14 times, why not pay for us to go to school, learn a trade? We need incentives, not a stick all the time. So he was experiencing treatment as a stick in some ways. There was a frequent message is that recovery is more than just, going to meetings. One person said, I want to work, I want to give back, pay taxes, have a family, own my own home and my own business. So some of the observations that we had, that is what staff and members were sharing, what we saw was that the peer participatory process, which was the strongest asset in the centers, could also become the greatest vulnerability. And by that, we meant that if the peer participatory process was not grounded in shared values across all of these centers, the centers were unique. They responded to their community context, but we needed shared values across them to drive not only how things looked across all of the centers, but also within the centers. The vulnerability was that there was such a sense of in each center that the people, the members were leading, which is awesome. That's what we want to see. But there's a pitfall in that if that leading is not tied to shared values, then it can be instead driven by personality. So in some instances, we saw that people who may have been there the longest or who had the biggest influence, the biggest voice, who were more outgoing, could drive decisions and were the culture of the center was becoming reflective of individuals in the center. And so that was a vulnerability. Training, I talked about the need for that, particularly when we're having volunteers who were taking such a key role in these centers. Training became huge. All of the centers excelled at creating this warm, healing environment. What we needed, what we felt we were hearing and seeing as the next phase of this center development was exactly what people started to talk to about. They needed the center to be not just help them with sustaining their recovery, but be a bridge back into rebuilding their life in the community. So community inclusion. So if the centers could move beyond, we've got computers, if you want to use computers and you want to, do job searches, that was a passive approach. People were asking for a more intentional, assertive approach. We need help with these things. Can that assertively be built in to the life and the culture of these centers? So I'm looking at the time, and I'm gonna speed through the recommendations. We recommended a statewide visioning process so that they could be grounded in shared values. We recommended that the centers be equipped with the ability to have training around mental health and trauma challenges, how to address those. We focused on in creating increasing resources so that the centers could have more resources available to address material needs and system navigation. We focused and recommended the integration of recovery coaches and connection to access to recovery so that the recovery coaches could be mobilized within the centers. Most of the centers at that time did not have recovery coaches. They were staff and they were volunteers, but not recovery coaches. We recommended that there would be a learning collaborative for center staff. So the directors came together, but the staff often didn't come together in learning environments. A marketing campaign was recommended because people said, we just stumbled across the center. So many people don't know that these are here. We recommended that there be a flexible funding approach because the centers had different environments, different needs, and a one-size-fits-all funding approach was not consistent with what people were saying they needed. And we were also recommending an impact evaluation. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Danielle, for a quick, what did BSAS do in response to these recommendations?
Thank you, Ijeoma. I will try to be fast. I'm not sure where I'm at with time, but I'm going to try. Are you all seeing this in slide view or are you seeing it in presenter view?
Slide view.
So you see my notes?
Yes. See your notes.
Oh, boo. Okay. Sorry. Let's try it again. Let me get it out of it. What I can speak to right now is that I'm proud to say that this process that we did with Ijeoma and the team to perform this at record speed. I don't know if she alluded to that, but we didn't have a lot of time to really conduct this in a manner that, you know, we could go on and be lengthy, like a lot of our projects that we tend to do when we're doing this work. All right, let's see if I do it this way. Get out of here. I want you guys to see because there's so much content. Okay. This should do it. But I can always speak to it if for whatever reason it didn't. We'll just do it. Let's see this. How does that look? Good?
It's coming up.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So record time. So speaking of record time, so we conducted these focus groups in a very short window of time. The reason that I want to raise that up is because sometimes when we're developing things in systems, we're relying on research projects that are from a long time ago, but we want the empirical research projects because they sort of like a lot of the research I get from RRI is really like this data-driven, informs this data-driven decision-making that we hold very valuable at the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services. And certain things that came up like recovery capital being critical to people's ability to build and sustain recovery is why we infuse that into the RFR, right? We know that from this layers and layers of research on recovery science that this is an unmet need by the treatment system, by mutual aid, and by many of the recovery support services that we have. As Ijeoma alluded to, we've become really strong overall at social connectedness, emotional support, connecting people to some resources, but not really as hyper-focused on looking at someone's whole dimension of wellness, a holistic approach to building capital with people. So that science and research was able to justify why we need to do more of that in these spaces, why it needs to be part of the model, et cetera. But there's other things that came up through this project that if we were waiting, we wouldn't have had time. So this was almost like a good balance of we have this, and then we're also going to do this to make sure we're on track and that the voice of lived experience is considered and that we actually have a good lay of the land of what is going on right now post-COVID. And that was also a decision process too of really seeing at these 39 centers throughout the state. You can see here the ones in green are the ones that are most recently funded. We made every effort this round to fund according to things we were hearing in community, folks that were disproportionately impacted by the opioid epidemic. Small organizations that were improving the ability to meet BIPOC community needs, and other underserved population, rural communities. We really have been trying to be intentional. But what we wanted to see when we did the assessment with the 26 around the state is where was the universal truths coming through for all of these folks that they're saying this is something we need, right? Because then we know that that's something we really need to get into this because this is something that is universal and is showing over time to be consistent. But then we also had to contend with the fact what is showing up because we're in a post-COVID pandemic crisis that may not be a long-term change in this, that may not be permanent, right? This might be temporary, and we actually are finding some of that now. But so really this became a way to combine evidence-based practice, some of the emerging science with practice-based evidence, ensuring the voice of lived experience from not just the PS staff, but those participating in the center was informing our decision-making. As Ijeoma alluded to, our peer participatory process model was so strong, and I had concerns, right? So as we evolved and started incorporating these other things, are we going to lose it? Are we going to lose the heart of this? And that is something that I've been very intentional about ensuring we do not, because that is what makes these centers so special. But we were also contending with the fact that the recovery community is telling us that they need more. They are telling us we need more help, we need more support, we're more high need, we're more high risk, we're more. And so things had changed. So how do we incorporate what they're saying they need and ensure we don't lose all the good old stuff that has been tried and true from the beginning and that I witnessed works and that others are saying still works, right? So that's what and you can see I kind of italicized, because what I found was that we had some centers, as Ijeoma, shared what they said or what they were doing, were really strong in some of these things, but not all. So the new charge became to see, well, they're proving that they have the ability to do this. If half the centers are doing this really well, then there is opportunity for all of them to be supported to start doing better outreach, forming better partnerships, being more intentional about building recovery capital and having activities that do so in the space. Not just, of course, still always pulling out the intrinsic gifts that people are bringing into the space through volunteer opportunities, and in so many different ways that the centers do it, but also really helping people look at their whole self. And if there's areas that they need support, making sure those partnerships are formed to get them the support they need so that they can focus on that part of their recovery, as well as building community inclusion. This is something that is elusive, but I want to just raise up about why it's so important. So what we often do in recovery services is build affinity and inclusion to the recovery space, which is critical, because when people are in early recovery, they feel really stigmatized often, and that stigma can be internalized for a very long time. So the only space where they can feel this connection and support is often the recovery community, others who understand, others who have that shared lived experience. But at some point where we notice that these centers have a great ability to help people just build community inclusion as a valuable member of their community. Not because of their recovery status, to be included in the community cookout, to be included in the parade, to be included at the seat at the table at a mayor's committee, right? Not just in spaces that are recovery can they rise, but that in any space they can rise. They're an asset to that community at that point. And that really helps people kind of move from being corralled and only able to that, to really launch into a life in recovery where they're pursuing their hopes and dreams as a human, not just as a person in recovery. So she raised a lot of stuff in the last slide, so I'm not going to go into it all, but I'd like to share some of the action we've taken, because we've taken some action.
Danielle, we have Sharon, and we have 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to you got to do the action in like about 15 seconds.
Oh, no. Okay. Let's see if it's long. I would say, all right, let me tell you this. We addressed every single piece of recommendation that Achara made. We have updated the RFA to give people the clear guidelines they want and follow that up with multiple different levels of capacity building meetings with our centers throughout the state. We conducted the visioning and values project that was recommended to unite them as a whole, while also encouraging them to be unique. We would never want two centers across the state to look identical. They have core components to go on, and they have the ability to be themselves. We've staffed up our unit to help provide more targeted support. We had our first recovery center event, which really unified them all. We created a tiering structure for funding, which allows them to stay small, grow to be mid-size, or really blow up and be a recovery hub with 7 staff if they wish to. And that creates that flexibility for equitable allotment. We increase funding overall for all per the recommendations. And we have increased trained staff, which allows for trajectory that they asked for. It allows the entry-level staff and volunteers to feel more supported and not feel like the only person in the space who knows what's going on is the director. There's actually trained staff of recovery coaches who are a little bit more seasoned. They can handle things better that come into the space if it's crisis or high need. We moved to accommodation rate, which allows the flexibility for them to add ancillary supports and services to address the needs raised up by the people. And we've done a lot this year, and I'll end with this, to increase their ability to handle the influx of mental health challenges at the centers. But I want you to know something else about this, which is we just conducted a poll 3 weeks ago with them and asked them what their most pressing need is today. And mental health came up, didn't even make the top 3. So this is a valuable consideration of how much of this was post-COVID versus how much of this, the biggest need they actually raised up now in the 39 centers is people coming in needing support with recovery capital, basic needs, on the basic needs side of that, having difficulty navigating just basic things in life. So that is interesting to us to know. So it doesn't mean we need to stop doing this work that's on here, right? And probably leaning more into trauma support for our center staff. But also that we need to recognize that a lot of money has went into Department of Mental Health. We have more access to psychiatrists than we did at this time in 2022. You couldn't even get in with a therapist or a psychiatrist. Now we have CBHCs. We have people who've stepped forward to meet the need in community, which has offset, I think, people coming to the centers in crisis seeking help to meet that need because they can't get their medication. They can't get in with psychiatry. So interesting fun fact of why we need to keep doing these type of engagements periodically if we really want to get a pulse on what's going on. So we'll probably due for another one, Achara. But thank you all for listening. This was a very important project that really helped shape the future of our centers.
Great.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Bettina. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this really exciting work. Ijeoma and Danielle, I'm just so impressed with the research, the powerful stories. There were comments in the chat about that. Highlighting the strengths of people and not just the challenges. I think that's really important in this kind of work. And then BSES for being an active partner and that additional information, Danielle, about what you've done since then and where you are going next is really important. I know we just have a couple minutes because some people will be dropping off, so I'll highlight just a couple things that really caught my eye and attention. I'm a researcher primarily. I do some collaborative work with the Detroit Recovery Project, and so I'm feeling still pretty new in the RCC space. And I am always very impressed. I think this issue about the peer participatory process is really, really important. And clearly these Massachusetts organizations are doing this well. And I think we need to be thinking about how to share that information better and further. And I think this kind of learning collaborative that Bettina has set up is one way to do that, but there's clearly more that needs to be done there, in addition to the formal services that the trainings that staffing need, the investing resources and all of that. I'd like to highlight this issue of complexity of clients. I'm sorry, clients is probably not the right word. I'm in the treatment world usually, but the mental health needs, the trauma needs, the social needs, the housing, all of those kinds of things. And that we need to get past individual people and we need to get past individual RCCs and take a systems approach. And how do we reduce silos, for instance, between SUD and mental health? In Massachusetts, we know they're under different organizations within the state. How do we get the partnerships to be developing so we can support the RCCs and the people who are there in ways that aren't just relying on the training that Danielle very nicely described to increase competencies among the staff and comfort with even talking about things like trauma or acknowledging that it exists, even if you're not doing anything about it. And I think what Ijeoma shared about some of these partnerships with community organizations are really important in happening at the individual RCC level, but we do need to get beyond the individuals to support other approaches. And I will just say, I know we've got a half hour to continue the conversation. I've got lots else that I can contribute, but I love that there's a call for research. And really, we in the research world are learning from you. The practice-based evidence is where we are right now. And we're trying to build up the evidence-based practice as well. And we're trying to meet in the middle. And the work that I'm doing with the Detroit Recovery Project, what we're hearing from the people being served there is that they want to share their stories. I think Ijeoma put that out there, and really they want to be heard. They want to talk about these things. and this being more than your recovery. You are more than your substance use. You're more than your recovery now. How do we get to this next stage of thinking it's not just hanging out together and having other people like you to talk to, but how do we improve the lives of people who have been suffering for some time and may not have recovery capital, may not have other options available to them. And those kinds of connections with the bank, with the community partners, all of those things really matter. And again, going back to the Learning Collaborative, to share those kinds of models so that other RCCs can build on them. So I will stop there and let Bettina open it up to the world. So I'm so excited. What a great project. What great findings for all of us to hear. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sharon, and so agreed. I mean, so many things to talk about here, and I'm excited to open it up. So I will just say we are at the hour. At this point, we will not stop recording, but this is where the video that goes online will stop. So anything being said after this point, we will summarize in writing and put the piece of writing on the website anonymized. But otherwise, this discussion is going to be private.